Ladies and gentlemen, students, Charlie Wittmack.
Well, it's always great to be at DMU and see all my old friends and be back with you guys. How many of you guys were here at DMU before I left? We've got a lot of you. Okay. Well, today I'm going to do something that I don't normally do, and it's a little bit strange to be in this situation of being halfway through an expedition and start talking about it. So today I'm going to use a lot of other people's words. I'm going to read a bit from my journal. I'm going to read you a bit from a book that I'm writing about this experience. And I'm going to do that because I haven't had a chance to really process a lot of the things that have happened over the last 6 months. This has been a very big year in my life and a big year in the life of my family. And a lot of the things that we've experienced we're still trying to come to terms with. So I'm going to try to stay on script more than I ordinarily do and share with you some different types of media that we've used to help tell this story. And I'm going to start with this.
Tell me about the inception of the World Triathlon.
When I was a freshman in high school, I was too young to not dream big, and so I was interested in. When I was a little kid, I was interested in books about adventure, and I would read stories about Captain Scott and Ed Hillary and Shackleton and these adventures, and I wanted to become part of that story. The story of all these guys going out and doing things that had never been done before. I was working in a bike shop, I was on the swim team, I was running on the cross-country team, and I began to become interested in triathlons. And so I would lay awake at night reading these stories and dreaming about triathlons. And I began to wonder what could be the world's toughest triathlon. And I thought if you could swim the English Channel, get on a bicycle, ride the bicycle to Mount Everest, and then climb Mount Everest, that would be the world's toughest triathlon. Nothing like it had ever been done, nothing like it had ever been dreamed of. And so I began looking through all the puzzle pieces to figure out how you could do it. And there's a short window for Everest, there's a short window for the Channel. The bike ride looked like it might be possible. There's mountain ranges, there's deserts, there's every obstacle you could have. But the weather windows all lined up. And as those puzzle pieces began to come together, there was this opportunity. And that opportunity became what I call the World Triathlon. The World Triathlon is about 10,000 miles, crossing 13 countries over 11 months. So it started when I was in high school, and I thought if I said to do the World Triathlon, nobody would believe that a little kid could do something like that. So I thought, begin with the bike. So I graduated high school early, and I participated in a 5,400-mile bicycle ride across the United States. And then I started climbing all around the world, anywhere I could get, and that culminated in the Mount Everest expedition in 2003. So the first two were down. I had to try to swim the English Channel, and started swimming in longer and longer marathon swims, which ended up with the English Channel last summer. Each leg of the World Triathlon would be one of the toughest human endurance events ever conceived. So training for any one of those is a really difficult thing to do. And it's extra hard when you put all three of them together and then combine them with a job and a wife and a career and a family. Our friends don't do these sorts of things. When I started telling them that we were really going to do this, people said, well, after you have kids, everything changes. And it's true, after James was born, everything did change. But all of a sudden, I felt this incredible responsibility to show him really who I am and to be myself. When you have a child looking at you, you can't really fake who you are, and you can't be something that you're not. Fitting all this in with a family and a wife and a job, you have to be creative, and you have to do sort of two things at the same time. So a lot of times Katie's time off during the day is when I take James, and so that means a lot of times he's in the backpack as I'm running the stairs. He's in the child trailer behind the bike, and he's got this great thing. The fun thing about carrying your coach on the back is he chirps, and he likes to go fast. So if I slow down on the stairs or if I slow down on the bike, you start hearing all this noise from the back of the bike or from the backpack, and you have to try a little harder, you have to dig deeper. And it's like carrying this little reminder with you about why you're working so hard and why you're doing
what you're doing. And the funny thing about kids is that they sort of see us as these superheroes, no matter what we do. And so with James, he challenges me to sort of be the person that he sees me as. Our kids challenge us to push deeper and to go further. And they test us in these really sort of intangible ways. And I think James in my life has really challenged me to be more than who I thought I could be. So I guess when I look at James, I see two things. I see the responsibility I have to provide for him and to provide for his dreams. But I also see the responsibility I have to him to pursue my own dreams and to show him that you've got to go after it with everything you've got.
So I thought today we'd just take a moment to get a little bit more into the psychology behind a project like this, because I know a number of you are trying to figure out how to do it all as students here at the Des Moines University and pursuing your hobbies and your family lives as well. So here's a little entry from my journal. My mother-in-law recently asked me to take a personality test that she had found helpful in understanding her 4 daughters. I put it off for months. The idea of taking a short test that would somehow sort me out in 50 questions was, for some reason, distasteful to me. Eventually, I did take the test, which reported that I am futuristic. I later came to learn that futuristic is an updated term for what my former school teachers referred to as a daydreamer, and what my wife, an industrial psychologist, prefers to call goal-oriented. Whatever term is used, I'll just go ahead and put it out there that most of my life has been focused on the future. I'm constantly overwhelmed with what Kate's Aunt Mary refers to as big ideas, as in no more big ideas after our Uncle Bill recently returned home with a 1965 Mustang. These big ideas distracted me through grade school. They made it hard for me to sit still at a dinner party. They kept me awake at night. I was thinking about all of this today as I spent the better part of the day swimming 11.5 miles of the River Thames. This particular big idea was something that I dreamed up almost 2 decades ago when I was 14 and growing up in Iowa. I was running on the cross-country team and swimming on the swim team. I worked at a bike shop after school. And with those interests, I became interested in triathlon, and before long, I was dreaming about what could be the world's toughest. To get to the start line of the World Tri, I spent my life chasing one big idea after the next. Every prerequisite that I identified was a big idea on its own, each with its own list of prerequisites. Most of those prerequisites had prerequisites too, and the years began to pass by as I hurried from one stepping stone to the next. Over the years, friends came and went. As it turns out, I spend so much time focused on big ideas that it really is too much for most people. I never remember a birthday. I rarely remember to return a phone call. Emails frequently go unanswered for far longer than they should. I'm constantly forgetting to tell someone important about something important that they should have heard first from me. Of course, I want to do all these things. I do, more than anything. Every year I make a resolution that I'm going to pay better attention, and every year I check off a list of prerequisites that I've completed, and the emails go unanswered. Eventually, the emails stop coming. Today was the most perfect day of swimming of my entire life. The weather was perfect. The river was like glass. As I swam, I was enveloped in a quiet stillness and an unprecedented calm. For perhaps the first time in my entire life, I was living in the moment. And it was a great moment. Now, have the sacrifices been worth it? Perhaps I'll never know. What I know tonight is that as I start this expedition, I'm free from the chains of big ideas and living in every moment. I've also got a lot of time on my hands to think about those emails.
All right, super rough demo of the song I Am a Visitor. I can come and go as I please. I can see winter through these trees. Barren branches of missing leaves sway in the wind and wave to me. Well, you can follow the advice of your heart, always looking for a place to start. Place to start is the hardest part. It always seems in your dreams I am a visitor. I am a visitor. I am a visitor. I hate to run. I hate to run. I am a visitor. I can see the table that is set for me. Family silver serves its feast, moving daily from west to east. Follow me, follow me. And the least we can do is share our wealth, raise our glasses to each other's health, throw a penny in to wish you well. It's all you need, plant a seed. I am a visitor. I am a visitor. I am a visitor. I have to run. I have to run. I am a visitor.
Well, there were good days on the triathlon, and there's bad days, and you have no idea how hard that lighter is to climb after swimming for 15 or 20 miles. But that's what we live for. We live for the good days and the bad days. This next video clip is a day I had swum about 18 miles and had walked up to the shore to take a beach and have a quick snack and have a little something to drink. And as we stood there having a snack, the tide went out. And this is what happened.
All right, we're checking in from the mud flats here. We have not made it to our destination. We started the day over there, and our destination is over there. And yesterday we calculated the tides, and we made it a lot faster than we thought. And today we calculated the tides, and we made it a lot slower than we thought. So we're kind of stuck, and as you can see here, we're pretty much in the middle of nowhere. So we have called the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard has asked us if we require rescue, and I don't think we require rescue. Brian may require rescue. He's getting a little cold.
Reason I'm stuck in the mud and this guy's making movies.
What he said, if we had landed anywhere else, it would have been fine. But right now we're in the middle of nowhere. This is marsh. It's not earth, it's marsh. And then there's a river. So he said if we walk that way, it's like an all-night trek. We'll never really reach land. So they're sending a rescue boat out of South End on Sear. They're going to pick us up here at the water's edge.
What's going on through your head right now?
Why we do it, man. There's two types of problems you can have on expeditions. You can have problems money that can fix. You can have problems money can't fix.
And what type is this?
This is a problem money can't fix. You're just in the shit. And there ain't nothing you can do about it. See, the problem now is the tide keeps going out. I don't know if we'll ever get back to the sea. Hey, the good news is we're going to get to see the longest pier in the world.
Oh, so we got that going for it.
We got that going for us.
It's almost worth it.
Almost worth it.
We're getting rescued, by the way. Kelly's never had to get rescued before. I'm glad to be a part of it.
19 years of doing this stuff and never rescue. Till tonight. This is how nice the people in England are. They actually thanked us for calling and offering to get out of the water tonight. They didn't want us going through the shipping channel in the dark.
So today, this is what swimming the Thames looks like.
So that's a bad day. I was in Kazakhstan a few months later, and I was having breakfast at a hotel, and there was a guy from the UK that was there, and we got to talking about why he was in Kazakhstan, and I got to talking about why I was in Kazakhstan, and his eyes got real wide, and he looked at me and he says, "You're the American that got stuck in the mud flats." And I said, "Yeah," and I turned kind of red, and I said, "You heard about that one?" And he said, "Everybody's heard about that one." And I guess it's true. I've had several other people in the UK confirm that. So if you've got friends in England, you can tell them that you know the guy that got stuck in the mud flats. Now, many of you know I tried to swim the English Channel in 2008, and I almost died. About 7 hours into the swim, my doctor ended the expedition. They pulled me out of the water temperature, the water, and my body temperature was about 83 degrees. So I was in pretty bad shape that day. I did swim the English Channel this year, and it was a big moment for me. And I can't really talk about it yet. So instead of talking about it, I'm going to show you some pictures, and I'm going to caption the photos with Wayne Dre's Twitter feed. And Wayne Dre's is an ESPN journalist who's been following me around the world, and he's working on a documentary film that'll be on ESPN later this year. So this is the English Channel as captioned by Wayne Dre's via Twitter. 7:30 a.m. In the English Channel today, watching Charlie Wittmack of the World Tri attempt to swim from England to France. 7:47 a.m. Heading to the starting point, Kate tells Charlie, "You're going to swim to France today." She seems to be more excited than he is. 8:28. At 8:28, Charlie pushes off from Samphire Hoe Beach in England, bound for France, as he attempts to become the first American to complete the peak and pond. 9:30 a.m. Support team today includes Art Wittmack, MAPS, Sue Wittmack, Nutrition, Dr. John Quinn, Medical, Andy King, Pilot, Andy Smith, Co-Pilot, Wayne Dre's, ESPN, Kate Wittmack, Motivation. Dee Wittmack is in deal with Charlie's son, James. Brian Triplett is handling communications. 10:39. Amazing to watch. Stroke after stroke. Now over 4 miles down. 11 a.m. At last feeding, Wittmack asked the crew in his boat, "Anybody barf yet? It looks like a rough day on the boat." In fact, 3 of the crew had already thrown up by that point. They didn't tell me that until later. 11:30. 3 hours into the swim, and Charlie shows no fatigue and is cracking jokes at every feed. 6 hours. Wittmack has passed into French waters. For the first time, France looks closer than England. 7 hours. Some Advil, a Red Bull, a quick hi to Kate, and back at it. The determination is incredible. During his last feeding, quote, "Well, we're past the point where I almost died last time, so that's good." Roughly 8 nautical miles to go. 4 p.m. 2 birds are eyeing Wittmack, trying to peck his toes, convinced he's a fish. 4:28 p.m. Amazing to watch. 10 straight hours of swimming at 34 strokes a minute is approximately 21,000 strokes. So far. 4:32 p.m. Tide has picked up and is pushing Wittmack off desired course. He's still swimming strong. The next 30 minutes are the key to getting back on course. 4:35. British captain just stuck an American flag in the back of his boat. Said Wittmack, "Damn glad to see that flag." 6:02 p.m. Captain says, just like that, Wittmack is back on course and eyeing land in a couple of hours, as long as the tides don't get crazy. 6:21. Wittmack, "I want 2 smiling faces on this side of the boat and stop pointing to France." Approximately 1.5 nautical miles to go. I started cracking up at this point a little bit. 7:15. Wittmack just had what should be his last feed. Sun setting behind him, cliffs of France right in front. 7:18. As land inches closer, Captain reminds Wittmack to follow the front of the boat to France. His response, "I'm not going alone." 7:20 p.m. Captain says that if things keep going to plan, Wittmack should reach France in about 30 to 45 minutes. 7:22. Despite extreme seasickness, Kate hasn't left Charlie's side in the last 4 hours. She couldn't be closer to him if she was actually in the water. 7:31. As France inches closer, Wittmack blows a kiss to his wife mid-stroke. She and his dad begin to sob. 8:02 p.m. Maybe 1,000 yards now. 10 minutes or so. A small raft has replaced the fishing boat. 8:27. The sun is about to set. There are a few kids playing on the beach. And after exactly 12 hours, Wittmack is standing in France. 9:15. Back in the boat, one of the first things Wittmack says is, "We landed in a great place to start the bike. I'm finally convinced he's nuts." Well, this next bit is an excerpt from the book I'm writing about this year. I had completed my swim to France 12 hours earlier, but every time I tried to close my eyes to sleep, I found myself floundering through the darkness of the channel. My bed had become a boat, and it was rocking back and forth through my imagination as my stomach turned and the sea pounded in my ears. Lying on my back, I stared at the ceiling, trying to take control of my mind. But it was no use. I'd been dreaming of swimming the English Channel for most of my adult life, and now that I had finally crossed it, the dream just didn't want to let me go. A gentle breeze was blowing through the window of our third-floor bedroom, filling the room with salty air and completing the illusion that I was still at sea. As I listened to the curtains dance against our bedroom wall, I could hear Kate breathing softly beside me, each breath echoing the waves that were rolling up the rocky beach outside our window. James was curled up into a ball between us, tucked neatly under Kate's left arm with his little nose and eyes buried safely in her ribs. Months earlier, at the peak of my training, I had often woken early for a workout to discover that James had sneaked into our bedroom in the night. In his quiet state, my son became the source of my greatest strength and simultaneously my greatest weakness. I was torn between my desire to savor these precious and fleeting moments of parenthood and my ambition to complete a goal that I had pursued for almost 2 decades. Most mornings when I awoke to this dilemma, I decided that I could do both. I wrapped my arms around my family and delayed my workout for 20 minutes. Hours later, when I was on the back end of a 20,000-yard workout, I frequently wondered whether those moments would be so special without the context that my training and expeditions provided. For years, I had lived in a tiny little space that I had chiseled out of the dichotomy of security and adventure, as I simultaneously pursued 2 sets of incompatible dreams. In one life, I had a wife and a son that I adored, and a fulfilling career that paid the bills and offered a promising future. In my other life, I had become obsessed with achieving a set of objectives that civilized society had for the most part deemed impossible, often with the very real threat of physical harm or even death. It had taken 15 years for me to find a balance between these 2 worlds. My life on the edge and the memories of friends that had been left behind in pursuit of our shared objectives had caused me to cherish moments that otherwise might be taken for granted, while fostering an incredible zeal for what others might find mundane. I pursued my marriage, my career, and parenthood with the passion of a man who recognizes that these things as the incredible gifts that they are, and realizes that it might all be gone tomorrow. At the same time, I drew on the security that was provided by my family and career to find the strength to dig deeper in pursuit of the impossible. Inside the dichotomy of security and adventure, I had found strength. As the bed began to rock again, I decided to get up and begin the process of patching my body back together. Marathon swimming is an incredibly rigorous sport, but the hangover that results from a 20-mile swim is far worse than the challenges of the swim itself. Physiologists estimate that a marathon swimmer will burn up to 14,000 calories during a typical 20-mile swim. If you have an experienced pilot, a well-organized team, and a carefully planned feeding program, you may be able to replace up to 4,000 of those calories during a day of open water swimming. These intermittent snacks come in the form of a high-carbohydrate energy drink that's prepared by your support team and tossed overboard every 45 minutes. If the seas are calm and you can successfully reach the water bottle, your escort pilot will allow you to tread water or float on your back for up to 90 seconds while you attempt to ingest the drink. If you can get the entire drink down, you'll get your 4,000 calories, leaving you with a deficit of 10,000 calories for the day. Because of this deficit, your body will enter a state of shock after about 6 hours of swimming, as it literally begins to digest itself. The process can become so severe that some English Channel swimmers have reported losing up to 1 pound of body weight per hour of swimming. The history books of Channel swimming are filled with stories of swimmers who successfully reach France, only to collapse on the beach at Cap Grenade because of this effect. The trouble with collapsing on French soil is that you can't just catch a ride to the hospital in Calais. Swimming the Channel is not a legally recognized method of entry into France, and there's no immigration post at Cap Grenade. Accordingly, after completing the crossing, you have to swim back to your escort boat and then take a very long ride back to Dover. Fortunately, I had made it safely home to England, but 12 hours after climbing out of the channel, I was crashing. My muscles burned and my joints ached deeply. I was covered in a light sweat, and I knew from experience that my fever would continue to climb for several more hours before breaking. Each pulse of blood through my body caused a sharp pain to course from my brain to my eyes, and my heart was beating wildly. The tendons around my shoulder had been abused, and my arms were involuntarily locked at my sides. During the previous week of swimming, I had aspirated a dangerous amount of seawater, and my ribs were bruised from the coughing fits that had resulted. One of the bones in my left forearm hurt quite a bit more than usual, and I wondered whether I might have a stress fracture. My stomach had given up trying to find the nutrients required to rebuild my body and was protesting with a painful cramp. From my fingertips to my toes, everything ached. Even the hair on my head hurt, having spent the better part of the day trapped inside a tight swimming cap. I leaned on my left arm as I attempted to roll out of bed, but my limbs had clocked out hours earlier. As I weighted my arm, it collapsed, and I cascaded out of the bed onto the hard wooden floor. I landed solidly on my right shoulder and hip as a new layer of agony coursed across my body. Not wanting to wake James, I clenched my teeth together and swallowed a scream. Then I stood up, dusted myself off, and carefully limped down 3 flights of stairs to the kitchen. It was the next day that I began this 8,000-mile bike ride across Europe and Asia to India. And I rode 23 days through the desert in Kazakhstan. And on riding out of the desert, I was immediately hit by a car. So I had to send an email to my sponsors, and this was the email. Today, at a little after 1 p.m. Kazakh Eastern Time, I was struck by a white Audi 100 approximately 25 miles northeast of the Kazakh city of Turkestan. At the time of the accident, I was cycling at 18 miles per hour southeast on Highway M32. I was traveling on the far left side of the roadway, riding into oncoming traffic. I usually ride on the left side of the highway so that I can move off the asphalt onto the shoulder when oncoming traffic appears. The vehicle that struck me was also traveling southeast and moving at a rate of 45 to 50 miles per hour. The accident occurred when the vehicle pulled into the left lane to pass a slower-moving vehicle on the right side of the roadway. As the vehicle attempted to make the pass, it struck the right side of my rear rack, which pushed the rear wheel of my bike out from under me. My helmet struck the rear left passenger door, and I fell onto my right side on the asphalt highway. I was separated from my bicycle at the time of impact and slid down the highway about 10 to 15 feet. I briefly lost consciousness. My support team, Vadim and Igor, were about 10 kilometers away at the time of the accident and appeared on the scene within a few minutes. I was disoriented and scared, but suffered no major injuries. I have some minor road rash on my right side and some swelling on my right knee, hip, and hand. My bicycle suffered minor mechanical and cosmetic damage, but is repairable. My jersey and pants were ripped, and my iPhone was crushed, but somehow remains operational. I plan to rest today and tomorrow in Turkestan. I think Yogi actually got that email that day. And I had taken this out, but I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna take 4 extra minutes, and I'm gonna read you the piece I took out a minute ago. The title is Riding on the Wing of a Hero. This was a dispatch on my website. Even tough guys cry once in a while, which, if you think about it, means the rest of us don't stand a chance. I woke up yesterday feeling a little off. It had been 3 days since I was hit by a car on the M32 highway in southern Kazakhstan. It had also been 3 days since I had been on the bike. The excuses were easy enough to find. My hip's too swollen. Let's take a rest day. I need to buy more lights. Let's drive to the next town. It's raining too much. There's no visibility. Too much road construction here. Igor and Vadim were shaken too. I think it's better not to use your bicycle here. Drivers in this town are crazy, Vadim would say as he twisted his index finger into his temple. Each night I would lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing the sounds of the accident replaying in my mind. Click, smack, slap, slide. It's been 5 years since we lost one of our great heroes, Dr. Bob Breedlove, during the 2005 race across America. I was in Charleston at the beach with Kate and her family when I got the news that Dr. Bob had been hit by a car while riding through Colorado. I remember sitting in the kitchen of the condo trying to explain to my wife's family the extent of this tragedy. He was the most incredible guy, I told them. He had this amazing family. His wife and his kids adored him. He was a doctor at the very top of his profession, respected by his colleagues as one of the best around. And on top of all of that, he was one of the greatest endurance athletes in the world. He could ride for literally days at a time without resting. As I sat stunned, I said, "This is a guy who never wasted a single minute of his life. He loved life more than anyone I've ever known. He had it all." During this ride, I've called on Dr. Bob a couple of times on some long, tough days. "Only 160 miles today?" I could imagine him saying. "Call me back when you tack a 0 on the end of that." Dr. Bob once rode from Huntington Beach, California to Atlantic City in 9 days, setting a record for the distance, even though he routinely stopped at firehouses along the route to help raise money for the victims of September 11th. Laying in bed at night, I imagined that tiny little inch on a Kazakh highway that separated my destiny from Dr. Bob's. I rolled over in bed yesterday after another sleepless night, logged into my Skype account, and sent Kate an instant message. We chatted for a few minutes, talking mostly about everyday sort of stuff like backyard barbecues and the kinds of things that sound amazing from 10,000 miles away. Then she typed, "I love you. You can do this." I logged off and stared at the screen. How brave is my wife? I thought to myself. How can one tiny little person be so impossibly and monumentally strong? I couldn't answer these questions, so I went and sat in the shower and cried. After the shower, I joined Vadim and Igor at breakfast. "So, what's the plan for today?" Igor asked, knowing that we were as likely to be heading to the airport in Almaty as we were to be bicycling to the border of Kyrgyzstan. I paused, I took a deep breath. Then I told them, "I'll ride." After breakfast, we set to work fixing the bike, inspecting the tires, changing the inner tubes, truing the wheels, adjusting the derailleurs, lubing the drivetrain, adding lights to the back of the bike. Slowly and meticulously, we made sure that everything was just right. "Slowly," Vadim said as I made the adjustments. "There's no hurry. Take time." As we approached the border with Kyrgyzstan, I told Vadim, "I'm nervous." "I'm nervous too," he said. "Really, my heart is racing." At the border, I said goodbye to Vadim and Igor as I crossed another invisible line and passed into the next new world of my journey. As I rode across the border, my new host, Mirbek, was waiting patiently for me with his driver, Bolat. "Welcome to Kyrgyzstan," Mirbek shouted enthusiastically. I rode slowly for a long time, listening to my breathing and regulating my heart rate. As I rode, the aches and pain in my right hip and knee began to slip away. I cycled a bit longer and dropped a gear. I felt the crisp wind in my face, and it felt good. So I dropped another gear. The children were let out of school, and they stood along the road smiling and waving. In their faces, I saw my son James. I grinned back at them and dropped another gear. I reached the town where I had planned to spend the night, but I kept riding. Mirbek and Bolat arrived in the town and asked the police if they had seen an American come through on a bicycle. The police pointed the direction I had ridden and said, "He was flying." When they stopped me, I told them that I wanted to ride on to Bishkek, where we had planned to stop the following night. "I've got good legs today," I told them. The afternoon was perfect. I took out my iPod and plugged in the right earpiece, leaving the left for traffic. The sun bathed in the landscape in a warm golden light, and as I rode, the temperature slowly dropped, cooling me off as I rode harder and harder. To my right, the view was dominated by a curtain of snow-covered peaks stretching up into the sky. I realized that I had reached the northern Himalaya. The hair on my arm stood up. A semi passed me on the left, and I leaned into its draft and dropped another gear. My iPod circled through songs, and Bono began screaming in my ear. "Who's to say where the wind will take you? Who's to say what it is will break you? I don't know which way the wind will blow. Who's to know when the time has come around? Don't want to see you cry. I know that this is not goodbye." A tear streamed down my cheek, and I clicked the shifter. But I was out of gears. Confused, I looked down at the computer on my handlebar to see that I was riding 33 miles an hour, complete with a handlebar bag, knobby tires, and racks. A grin stretched from ear to ear, and I howled into the mountains. I was back. My jersey is white, and my bike is red. But if you hear stories of an orange streak in Kyrgyzstan, it's because I'm riding with Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob wore an orange jersey, and you still see him. People wear him in town as a tribute to him. And I'll close with this one. This is a little slideshow from the Torgard Pass. After having so many troubles in Kazakhstan, I was ready for a fresh start in Kyrgyzstan, and I got it. Kyrgyzstan is easily one of the most beautiful countries in the world. It feels a lot like the American West, but there's almost no development, and the mountains stretch another 2,500 feet higher into the sky. The roads, however, in places are not great, but the landscapes more than make up for that. I had planned to take about 4 days to climb the Chomkamen Valley to the top of the Torgard Pass. On the first climb, on the first day, the shifter for my rear derailleur, the part that changes the gears, broke off in my hand. My host, Mirbeck, quickly appeared and started working the phones to find a solution. Mirbeck is used to this type of assignment. A week earlier, he had covered the Beijing to Paris road rally and had spent 10 days trying to find a transmission for a broken-down Land Rover. In these mountains, you need a Toyota, he told me. And as you know, I needed little convincing on that point. After some work on the phone, we arrived here at what I was told was the shop of Kyrgyzstan's bike guru. I told the guru what we needed, and he looked despondent. He had lots of replacement parts, but not the one that I needed. Mirbeck got back on the phones, and a couple of hours later, we arrived here and met these nice couple that operated a computer supply shop, but they had a bicycle that they were willing to rent. The fact-checkers in the group will no doubt notice that this is actually a Giant, and I had reported that I was riding a Huffy, but I assure you that it was department store quality nonetheless. In order to take the bike, however, I needed to leave some papers or a deposit, which provided an obstacle because I needed my papers to cross the border into China, and I couldn't leave a deposit because I was sending the bike back with Mirbeck after I crossed the border. So Mirbeck came up with a solution for that too, and the next day we met Anton. Anton's also a cyclist and was willing to do anything he could to make our trip a success. So he put down his papers, and I got back to work. Now, cycling in Kyrgyzstan is like riding your bicycle through a symphony. The beauty is completely overwhelming, and each day seems to unfold in movements. Each day started with a fresh little sonata as I bicycled across an expansive, lush valley. After a couple of hours of riding, the second movement would begin poco adagio. The second movement was always a canyon with a babbling stream and absolutely relentless headwinds. The third movement was always a climb, an energetic little scherzo. Every day there was at least one climb of several thousand feet. One of the rules of the climb was that there could be no road in this section, and there was almost always rain or snow. After reaching the pass, I would finish with a quick little rondeau in a beautiful valley that was unusually not at all like the place I had begun. However, winter was coming to the highlands, and there was a lot of traffic on the road as the mountain inhabitants began to work their way back down into the lower valleys. Sometimes I could work my way through traffic, and other times I just had to get out of the way. In places, the road had turned completely to mud, and although the going was tough, it seemed that I was having a much better time than some of the trucks. On the second day of climbing, I got a flat tire. It was below 32 degrees, and the rain was freezing. As I tried to inflate the replacement inner tube, my pump broke. Mirbeck and Bolat were waiting for me in the next town, so I hid my bike off the road in the grass and started walking. When we returned to the site, an hour later, the bike was gone. Mirbeck spent the day on the phone trying to track the bike with the GPS locator that was still attached and talking with the police. Eventually, the search came to an end, but Mirbeck called back to Bishkek and asked Anton to send us another bike. As we waited, it began to get quite cold, and the snow slowly started creeping down from the mountain into the valley. When the bike arrived the next day, winter had come. It was getting very, very cold, and I was anxious to get started. But as soon as I started cycling on the new bike, the derailleur snapped right off. The weekend had now arrived, and the border was closed. So I headed back to the village of Narin and waited for a fourth bike to be sent up. By this point, I was beginning to think that driving over the pass might not be such a bad idea. But the yaks offered me some encouragement. and I spent the weekend waiting. By Monday, I had tuned up my own bike for a fourth attempt on Torogart. The shifter was still broken, and I could ride in only one gear, but I decided I had to give it a shot. In fact, there was so much ice that I don't think the gears would have worked anyway. The brakes were frozen and no longer worked, and ice eventually built up on the seat tube so much that it rubbed a hole in my back tire. Now, the last day is extremely difficult. It includes 3 passes that are all above 13,000 feet. But after I reached the first pass, I had some confidence. At the second pass, I started to have some fun. And by the third pass, I never wanted it to end. At 6:51 on October 25th, I rode my bike across the Torogart Pass, fulfilling a childhood dream. The temperature was -5, and I was tired and cold and emotional, but I had a warm heart. To reach the pass, I had ridden across 70 kilometers of snow and ice and climbed 3 passes above 13,000 feet, all on a bicycle with only one gear. As it turned out, it wasn't strength that allowed me to reach the Torogart Pass. It was patience. So often when we're asked to stretch to reach a personal or professional goal, we don't reach it on the first attempt. In the frustration of defeat, we often have the desire to give up, but we have to be patient and try again. On the Torogart Pass, I learned that the fulfillment of reaching a goal that wasn't easily attained was worth the wait. So these little slideshows I put together kind of with the idea they were for James. So there's a series of them on the website, and Katie used to read them to James as bedtime stories while I was gone. So this gives you kind of an idea of the types of things we've been doing and how we've been doing it. And these stories and many others are available at our website at theworldtri.com. And the fun thing about the spring is I'll be leaving here, I'll be flying back to Kathmandu and pick up the bike as close to where I left off as I can, finish up with about 1,300 miles of cycling, and then begin running up to the Everest base camp. And the pace from the Bay of Bengal, it'll be about 50 marathons in 50 days. And I'll get to the Everest base camp during the first week of April, and then hopefully to the summit of Everest the last week of May. But what's great about the spring is the technology over there in India and Nepal is incredible now. They have 3G towers that serve most of this. So my iPhone should work the whole way, and I'll be posting pictures and dispatches and things along the way. So be sure to tune in on the website. And you can also connect on Facebook, either with me personally or at facebook.com/theworldtri. And look forward to keeping in touch with you guys. But you all, I think the students are in a really difficult place because you all are facing the challenge that I've been facing for many years now, which is how do we live this balance? As professionals, how are we successful in our career? How do we find time to pursue our passion, which I think gives us the strength to be the best at our careers? And at the same time, be so focused primarily on those important family events that we need to be around for. So good luck, and hopefully you've got some ideas today. And now I guess we're going to have some chatting.
Listening here is the first time I never heard this. Charlie, thank you very much for coming here, sharing your story and your adventures and journey. And as you mentioned, for us here at DMU, the message is that we all can have our own Mount Everests in our mind and work hard to conquer them and achieve them. So thank you. And we'd like to invite you to come back here after you finish your second attempt at the Mount Everest. So we'll see you here in August, September.
Excellent. Yeah, I look forward to that.
We have a few minutes for any questions if anybody has. So we have about...
Yeah.
Hi, Charlie.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you. What gear was it that you crossed the Torogart Pass?
What gear? Yeah, Jan wants to know what gear I crossed Torogart Pass. It was in the little ring on the front and about 3 or 4 up, so it was tough. It was so steep I had to go back and forth like this on the road in the snow. You know, I couldn't ride the road directly, and it was really slippery and very difficult.
How many gears on your bike?
It's 10, 20 speeds, I guess, altogether. Yeah, but I've had to put the tires down to about 10 PSI, so they were really flat and good for gripping on the snow and ice. Technical question. Yeah, and the white sweater.
You didn't mention it. Maybe you don't want to talk about it, and that's fine. But apparently you interrupted the journey because you had both pulmonary edema and cerebral edema.
Yeah, I had this.
So I'm curious, since I know from the prior talk, and that the cerebral edema kind of impacts your decision-making ability. So did you make the decision to stop, or did someone say, Charlie, you need to stop?
Yeah, I did. In Tibet, to get on the Tibetan plateau, it's almost all above 18,000 feet. And so the third of the 3 passes is the toughest. It reaches an elevation of 18,300 feet. It was a 120-mile bicycle ride and 120 miles and 11,000 feet of climbing on the bike that day. And when I reached the pass, I had both a pulmonary and cerebral edema, which has never happened. I knew it was happening throughout the day. It comes on relatively slowly. So it was a ticking clock. I wanted to get to the pass and get back down as quickly as I could. I reached the pass, and it takes almost as long to get down as it takes to get up because there's not really a road. It's very, very difficult cycling. So I jumped in the Land Cruiser, and we drove down to the valley. And it took about 3 days to clear out my lungs and get my mental faculties back. But yeah, I've been training. I've experienced these things before, so no. Part of my training is knowing when to identify these, and I made the decision to drive down. And now we'll get back at it. Yeah, these guys, Dr. Vardaxis and Dr. Weir here have checked me out, and they tried to kill me on the treadmill upstairs, and they couldn't do it, so they've cleared me for Everest. Yeah, the toughest thing I've ever done is to survive the Human Performance Lab at DMU. Another question. It's a great question. Yeah.
One quick question. Did I hear you say they've got cell phone towers in the Khumbu region?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got cell phone all
Yeah, the
the
question was, you really have cell phone all the way? And yeah, the Chinese are just incredible what they've invested in their infrastructure. And so, yeah, there's a 3G cell phone tower that will serve all of Mount Everest, so we'll have our cell phones the entire way.
Okay, and this is a little bit of a naive question, but it's something I've been wondering about for a long time. In climbing Everest, how difficult is the climb? And I realize that it's difficult because of the elements, that it's dangerous, the landslides, that type of thing. How difficult is it from a rock climbing?
Yeah, the question is, how hard is Mount Everest? And technically, it's far from the most difficult climb I've done. It's primarily mountaineering, which means climbing on snow and ice. So the way we rate the difficulty of the mountains that are above 8,000 meters, or about 25,000 in feet, the way we rate the difficulty on those is by the chance of success versus fatality. So Everest is one of the safer of the 8,000-meter peaks to climb, and that means for every 5 people that reach the summit, there will statistically be 1 person that dies trying. Now, if that sounds like bad odds, Annapurna is the most dangerous and the most difficult, and it's reversed. So for every 1 person that reaches the summit of Annapurna, there's actually 2 fatalities. So as climbers, we say Everest is an easy climb. It's not a difficult climb, and it's not compared to the climbing that we do to train for Everest. But it's a very dangerous mountain, and it needs to be respected. So people that aren't qualified to be on the mountain frequently go because technically it's not as demanding, but the consequences for that are severe. Great question. Is there another question? Yeah.
Are you going with a guide up to Everest? And I know a lot of it's weather permitting,
Mm-hmm.
whether you can get to the peak if you can't get it on that path.
Yeah, do I go with a guide to Mount Everest? I don't go with a guide. I've never climbed with a guide. I believe that we should train for these expeditions as long as we need to be qualified to be there on our own. Everest, I don't believe, should be guided. You're too high. You're too cognitively impaired to be a guide at that elevation, and it's malpractice as soon as you try to do it. So I don't climb with a guide. I'll be there. I haven't chosen a climbing partner yet. Matt Bowman is a gentleman here from Des Moines who will be on my Everest team, and he'll be climbing with a Sherpa support team. And then there's a couple other guys here in Des Moines that we're kind of trying to work out the details, and if they're not available, then I'll climb with a Sherpa.
Are you looking for any volunteers from the audience?
What's that?
Are you looking for
Yeah. We do have a trek available, and so if you'd like to come to the base camp of Mount Everest, you're invited. We've got one group now that's a Livestrong Trek that's with the Livestrong Foundation, and Mercy is helping co-sponsor that. And it's actually underwritten, so if you don't have the financial ability to go to Mount Everest, if you're a cancer survivor or a cancer advocate, you can apply and possibly receive a scholarship to go. And then we also have openings for other people to come and trek into Everest Base Camp. It's going to be great. Yeah. Yeah, what happens at the end of this? Well, I've talked a lot today about synergy in our families and how we have to support each other. And so it's been fun. So Katie, we're working on her dreams now. And through this experience, she's taken this year off. She didn't want to work while I was off doing this. And so she's been writing a novel. And she just finished her first novel. And it's really brilliant. So we're kind of going through the lottery now of trying to use our media connections now to help her get her book published. So we're going to focus on her stuff. We're going to focus on some things with James. And there's going to be more adventures down the road. Yeah, is there one more maybe? Great.
So how does the maternal health
Great. That's a great one to close on. Well, Katie and I have become passionate about maternal health, and since we had James, and our good friends in Nepal have supported us for almost 10 years now. So it's about 1,000 times more likely that a woman would die in Nepal giving birth than she would here in the United States, and we've been very frustrated by that outcome. So yeah, teaming up with Dr. Shah in Global Health, we are in the process of developing our program over there. And we've recently partnered with a local nonprofit called Save the Children, and the White Ribbon Alliance is our continuing partner. The reason it's just been delayed is that Nepal has been operating without a government. The government was overthrown a number of years ago when the Crown Prince murdered the entire royal family. And after that happened, there was a power seizure, and the communist regime has now taken control. So even with that, they have 5 parties that now share control, 3 of which are communist, and they do not have a constitution, and they have not been able to establish a permanent government. So it's been very frustrating for Dr. Shah and I as we've been trying to make inroads and get the approval to implement this program. I think we've got it now, and I'm kind of knocking on wood, and hopefully we'll be beginning that process in March. And then I think hopefully have a continuous program in Nepal every October from now on. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that in the spring, and it should be very, very exciting. So thanks. That's a great question.
Good. Let's end with that.
Okay, and I'll hang around if you want to come up and ask more questions. I think we have to get another class in the hall here.
Thank you all again, and let's